Sign this, my husband said. My sister starts Monday. You'll train her before you leave. The paper was already on the desk when I walked into the arrangement room. Not a draft, not a proposal. A resignation letter with my full name typed at the top and a blank line waiting for my signature. Outside the frosted glass door, I could still hear the last of the folding chairs being stacked in the chapel. The lilies from my father's service had begun to release that heavy, sweet smell they get after too many hours under warm lights. His photograph was still on the easel beside the guest book. Half the town had come through that room that morning to shake my hand, tell me what a decent man he had been, and thank me for making the service feel like him. 40 minutes later, my husband was asking me to resign from the funeral home my father had helped me build. Grant stood across from me in his charcoal suit with his tie loosened exactly 1 inch, the way he always wore it after a service. He did not look ashamed. He looked impatient. "Read it before you react," he said. "I have read the first line." "Then read the rest." I sat down because my knees had started to feel unreliable. I had slept perhaps 9 hours total in the previous 4 days. Grief does not arrive alone. It brings paperwork, phone calls, casseroles, relatives who need directions, and people who say, "Call if you need anything," while looking relieved when you answer that you are fine. The letter said that I, Claire Weller, was voluntarily resigning as managing director of Weller and Pike Funeral Services, effective the following Friday. It thanked me for 19 years of dedication. It stated that I had agreed to remain available for a 30-day transition period and train the incoming operations director, Monica Pike, Grant's sister. I read that part twice. Monica is taking my position? She's taking over operations, and he said, "That's different." It is my title. It's a title, Claire. Don't turn this into something bigger than it is. The room seemed to narrow around him. On the wall behind his shoulder hung the framed Oregon Funeral Establishment license. Beneath it was my professional license, my photograph, my identification number, my signature. Grant's name appeared nowhere. He handled community relationships, vendor dinners, the website, and anything involving a golf tournament. He called himself co-owner because we were married and because his last name was on the sign. But a funeral home is not a restaurant where anyone with keys can decide to run the kitchen. There are laws, inspections, records, chain of custody requirements, prepaid contract regulations, and state rules that do not become optional because a family member wants a promotion. Monica has never managed a funeral home, I said. She managed the dental office for 7 years. She was fired from the dental office. She left because the dentist was impossible. She submitted insurance claims under the wrong provider number for 6 months. Grant's mouth tightened. This is exactly why we need a change. You always find the worst possible interpretation of people. No, I remember what happened. He put both hands on the desk and leaned toward me. My mother is having her second hip replaced next month. She'll need help for at least 12 weeks. Monica has children at home. I have the business. You're the only person with flexibility. I stared at him. You're firing me so I can take care of your mother. I'm not firing you. You're stepping back. I did not agree to step back. You said after your father died you wanted life to be quieter. I said the house felt quiet without him. That's what I mean. It was not what I meant, not even close. Grant reached for the pen lying beside the letter and placed it on the signature line. Sign it today. Monica starts Monday. You can show her the files, the software, the contracts, all the things you keep in your head. After that, you'll have time to help Mom recover and finally breathe a little. The casualness of it was almost elegant. My profession, my income, My father's building, my name on every compliance document, and his mother's care had been arranged into a neat solution without one conversation with me. "What happens to my salary?" I asked. "We'll cover your expenses." "My expenses? You know what I mean." "No, Grant, I don't." He exhaled through his nose. "Claire, this is not the day for one of your interrogations." My father's photograph was still 15 feet away. That was the sentence that did it, not the resignation letter, not Monica's name, not even the assumption that I would become an unpaid caregiver because the rest of the family had already decided their time mattered more than mine. It was hearing my husband tell me that the day of my father's funeral was inconvenient for my questions about the future he had arranged for me. I folded the letter once and placed it in my handbag. "I'll read it at home," I said. Relief moved across his face. "Good. We need to send the announcement tomorrow." I did not sign. That night, freezing rain tapped against the windows of our house above the Columbia River. Grant slept with his back to me, one hand beneath his pillow, breathing with the absolute peace of a man who believed the difficult conversation had gone well. I lay awake while freezing rain tapped against the windows and thought about how the business had begun. My father, Daniel, was a carpenter who mortgaged his cottage and quietly sold his fishing boat so I could finish mortuary school and purchase a failing Victorian funeral home in Astoria. He believed that on the worst day of a person's life, ordinary things still deserved to be done correctly. Grant joined me 2 years later. His family persuaded me to add Pike to the original Weller name because they said it would sound established. I agreed, still young enough to believe shared credit would naturally produce shared responsibility. It did not. I handled the licenses, families, records, staff, late-night calls, cemetery schedules, and every legal obligation. Grant handled public events and became known as the face of the business. Monica drifted in through small favors, then a company card, then administrative access. Each time she made a costly mistake, Grant called my concern unkind and left me to repair it quietly. For 19 years, competence had protected everyone except me. At 2:46 that morning, I slipped out of bed and went downstairs. My father's old drafting table stood in the small room off the kitchen. After he retired, he used it for puzzles, bills, and the careful sketches he made before building anything. When he died, I brought the table home. Grant wanted to put it in storage because it did not match our furniture. I kept it. Inside the bottom drawer was a red accordion folder labeled Property and Licenses. My father had printed the words on masking tape in his square carpenter's handwriting. I opened it beneath the yellow pool of the desk lamp. The deed to the funeral home building was first. Daniel Weller Family Trust. Sole beneficiary, Claire Weller. The trust had purchased the building after Grant and I married, using the proceeds from my father's land sale and the mortgage I had paid from my salary. The operating company rented the property from the trust for $1 a year. My father's attorney had structured it that way because he distrusted the ease with which family businesses blurred ownership. "Love people," he had told me at the signing, "but label the drawers." At the time, I laughed. The establishment license was next. Claire Weller, responsible licensee. The state did not list Grant as an owner because he was not licensed and held no controlling interest in the licensed entity. Years earlier, when we incorporated, Grant had received 40% of the operating company. I held 60. I had forgotten the exact number, not emotionally, legally. Marriage has a way of converting percentages into fog. We spoke about our business, our building, our staff, our future. Grant signed checks as president. I signed everything that carried consequences. I found the shareholder agreement. Any appointment of an operations director required majority approval. Any use of an unlicensed person in functions reserved for a funeral director was prohibited. Any transfer of my shares required my written consent. The clarity of the language was almost rude. I sat at my father's drafting table with the unsigned resignation letter beside me and felt grief change shape. It did not disappear. It hardened around the edges until I could hold it without spilling. Grant had not only ignored me, he had built his plan on the assumption that I would not check what belonged to me. At 7:10 the next morning, I called Evelyn Cho. Evelyn had been my father's attorney, and later mine. She practiced from an office above a bookstore in downtown Astoria and had a habit of answering legal questions with more questions. She picked up on the second ring. "Claire," she said, "how are you holding up?" The kindness in her voice nearly undid me. Nearly. "I need to ask you something before I lose my nerve." "You don't sound like someone losing her nerve." I told her about the resignation letter, Monica, Grant's mother's surgery, and the announcement they planned to send. Evelyn was silent for several seconds. "Did you sign anything?" "No." "Did the board vote?" "There is no board meeting scheduled." "Did anyone obtain your consent to appoint Monica?" "No." "Then nothing has happened except your husband has handed you evidence of what he intends to do," Evelyn said. We met that afternoon in her office above the bookstore. She reviewed the deed, shareholder agreement, licenses, and resignation letter, then confirmed what Grant had never bothered to check. He could not accept an unsigned resignation, appoint Monica without my majority vote, use my professional license without my supervision, or force my trust to keep leasing him the building. "Do not confuse their confidence with legal power," she said. I wrote the sentence on the back of my father's funeral program. We agreed to act cleanly. I would take formal bereavement leave and temporarily withdraw as responsible licensee. Every active family would be transferred, with consent, to Harbor and Finch across the river. The staff would receive temporary positions at the same pay, and the records and prepaid funds would remain protected. Meanwhile, the building would close for overdue electrical, roof, and moisture inspections. No grieving family would be harmed. No employee would lose a paycheck. Monica would simply arrive Monday to discover that the title Grant had promised her came with no license, no staff, and no open building. I admitted that I still loved him and did not want to destroy his life. "Then don't," Evelyn said. "Protect yours." Maya Hernandez, the director at Harbor and Finch, agreed to take the transfers before asking whether I had eaten. That was the first question anyone had asked me about my own condition since the funeral. That evening I made toast and soup, while Grant sat at the kitchen island drafting an email announcing Monica's promotion. He read parts aloud as though inviting collaboration. "Monica Pike brings extensive administrative leadership and a deep commitment to families," he said. "Does that sound strong?" "It sounds confident." He mistook the answer for approval. "Good. I knew you'd come around." I watched him choose a photograph of Monica smiling at a charity auction. He did not notice the scanner running in the next room as I copied payroll records and vendor contracts. On Thursday, Maya and I met with the 4 active families. I told each one that my father's death and an internal licensing matter required a temporary transfer. I did not mention Grant or Monica. Every family chose to continue with me through Harbor and Finch. One older man took my hand and said, "Your father came to my wife's service, even though he could barely walk." I had to look away. My staff reacted differently. Renee, our office manager, stared at me for a long time and then said, "I wondered when they would try it." "They?" "Grant and Monica." I asked what she meant. Renee opened a drawer and removed a notebook. For 8 months, Monica had been asking staff to copy her on financial reports. She had told the apprentice, Lucas, that soon the old systems would change. She had asked the bookkeeper whether my salary could be divided among 2 administrative positions after I retired. Retired. I was 51. Renee had written down dates because, as she put it, your father taught me to label the drawers. That was the first time I cried. Not when Grant handed me the letter, not during the funeral, not at Evelyn's office. I cried because my father's sentence had survived in someone else. By Friday afternoon, every transfer was signed. The state board acknowledged my temporary withdrawal. Contractors were scheduled to inspect the roof, wiring, and basement moisture. The trust issued written notice suspending the operating company's access to the building during safety work. I packed a suitcase that night, not for a rehabilitation apartment, not for a hotel, for my father's cabin near Cannon Beach. He had built it slowly over 12 summers from salvaged cedar and windows rescued from a demolished schoolhouse. It sat above a narrow beach where winter waves struck the rocks hard enough to shake the glass. Grant hated the cabin. He said it was damp, remote, and impossible to get a decent phone signal. Those were the reasons I chose it. "What is the suitcase for?" he asked from the bedroom doorway. "I'm going to the coast for a few days." "Now?" "Yes. Monica starts Monday." "I know. You need to train her." "No." He blinked. It was such a small word. I had used it thousands of times with vendors, insurance representatives, and cemetery schedulers. With Grant, I had usually buried it beneath explanations until it no longer sounded like refusal. This time, I let it stand alone. His face changed. "Claire, don't do this. I'm not doing what you asked. You know what I mean. I'm beginning to understand what you mean very clearly." He followed me downstairs while I carried the suitcase one step at a time. "Mom's surgery is in 3 weeks. Monica has already arranged childcare. The announcement is ready. You cannot suddenly make this about control." I stopped at the bottom step. "You typed my resignation. Because you avoid decisions. You made the decision for me. Because somebody had to." There it was again. The family logic in its purest form. If I did not volunteer quickly enough, they would call taking from me leadership. I put on my coat. "Monday morning you'll receive formal notice from Evelyn." His confidence finally cracked. "What notice?" "The funeral home is closed temporarily. The families and staff have been transferred. My license is inactive until the ownership dispute is resolved." For a second he simply stared. Then he laughed once. "You can't do that." I already did. "Claire, my name is on the building. Your name is on the sign." I left before he could answer. The drive to Cannon Beach took less than an hour, but winter made it feel farther. Rain moved across the highway in silver sheets. Dark fir trees leaned over the road. The ocean appeared between them in sudden gray openings. At the cabin, I turned on the heat, carried in firewood one piece at a time, and placed my father's funeral photograph on the mantel. Then I slept for 11 hours. Monday morning, Monica arrived at the funeral home at 7:45 wearing a cream wool coat and carrying a leather laptop bag Grant had bought her as a welcome gift. I was not there, but Renee later described every detail. The sign on the front door read, "Temporarily closed for safety inspection and licensing review. Active families have been contacted. No public access." 2 electricians were already inside. A roofing crew had ladders along the north wall. File cabinets were sealed. Computers had been removed for records protection. The chapel furniture was covered in canvas. Monica apparently tried her key 3 times. Grant arrived 12 minutes later. He called me at 8:03, then 8:04, then 8:06. By 8:10, I had 7 missed calls. At 8:13, he left a voicemail. "Claire, call me immediately. There are contractors inside. The computers are gone. Monica is standing in the rain. Whatever point you are trying to make, you've made it." I listened while sitting at my father's small kitchen table with coffee warming both hands. He still thought it was a point. At 8:21, Monica called. Her voice was already raised when I answered. "What have you done to the business?" "Protected it. You humiliated me in front of the staff." "The staff are working across the river." "You knew I was starting today." "Yes. That is vicious." "No, Monica. Vicious would have been allowing you to take legal responsibility for work. You are not licensed to perform because your brother promised you a title he did not own." She was silent. Then she said, "Grant said the license belonged to the company." "The establishment license is held under my supervision. My professional license belongs to me." "You're splitting hairs." "The state does not consider licensing a hair." She called me jealous. She said I had always resented how easily people liked her. She accused me of punishing their mother for needing surgery. I listened until she ran out of breath. Then I asked one question. "When did you first know Grant planned to remove me?" Another silence. "Claire, when?" "Before Thanksgiving." It was January. 3 months. They had discussed my job through Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas, my father's final hospitalization, and the week of his funeral. Monica had hugged me in the chapel and whispered that she was there for anything I needed. What she needed was my office. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For answering." I ended the call. Grant called again 10 minutes later. I answered because I wanted to hear whether he would ask how I was. He did not. "The electricians say they can't let me into the records room." "That is correct. I am president of the company." "You own 40% of the operating company. The trust owns the building. The records are under regulatory protection." "Stop talking to me like a lawyer." "I am repeating what my lawyer explained." "You went to Evelyn before speaking to me?" "You wrote my resignation before speaking to me." He lowered his voice. "My father is furious." "Your father is not a shareholder." "He helped put our name on the map." "My father put the money into the building." "That is not fair." The words surprised me, not because they were true, because they revealed the story Grant had been telling himself. His family's visibility counted as investment. My father's money, my license, my nights, my grief, and my work were merely the background against which the Pike name had become respectable. "I will speak with you when I return," I said. "When is that?" "When I decide." He hung up. For the next 4 days, I lived in a quiet I had not known was possible. I walked the beach in a raincoat with the hood pulled tight. I read beside the wood stove. I slept in the afternoon without explaining why. Maya called each evening with updates about the transferred families. Every service proceeded normally. My staff adapted within hours. Grant, meanwhile, discovered the business he believed he ran existed in systems he had never learned. He called vendors and found that contracts required my authorization. He attempted to access the prepaid trust portal and failed the security questions. He told a family friend that the closure was caused by overreaction, only to have that friend ask why a licensed establishment would be dependent on one person if management had been responsible. On Wednesday, Howard Pike left me a voicemail. "Claire, families in this town are talking. You have embarrassed the Pike name. Whatever disagreement you have with Grant should stay inside your marriage. Reopen the building and handle your personal problems privately. I listened twice. Then I forwarded it to Evelyn. She replied with one sentence. Excellent documentation. My daughter, Sophie, called that night from Seattle. She was 26 and worked as a civil engineer. Practicality was her first language. Dad told me you shut down the funeral home because Aunt Monica got promoted. That is not what happened. I know. Renee sent me a photo of the resignation letter. I closed my eyes. What did your father say? That Grandpa's death made you unstable. The fire cracked in the stove. There are sentences that hurt because they are cruel. Others hurt because they reveal how quickly someone reached for cruelty when facts stopped serving them. I am not unstable, I said. I know, Mom. I transferred every family. The staff are paid. The records are protected. I know. I didn't abandon anyone. I know. Her certainty steadied me more than comfort would have. Then Sophie said, Do you want to know what Aunt Monica posted in the family group chat in November? I did not, but I said yes. She sent me a screenshot. Monica had written, Once Claire steps away, we can finally modernize the place and stop running everything like a shrine to her father. Grant had responded with a thumbs up. I stared at the small blue symbol for a long time. My father had been alive in November. He had been weak, but alive. Grant had sat beside him at Thanksgiving, carved the turkey, and asked whether he needed another blanket. Then he had approved a message about removing my father's influence from the business his money had saved. That was the moment the shape of my marriage changed for me. Until then, I had believed Grant was entitled, careless, and deeply influenced by his family. Those things can be repaired if the person is willing to see them. The message was different. It meant he had watched me care for my dying father while quietly planning to use the death as an opportunity. I did not throw the phone. I did not scream. I saved the screenshot in a folder marked Governance. Grief is strange. It can make a woman sentimental about objects and ruthless about facts. On the 5th day, Grant's tone changed. His first messages had been commands. Call me. Fix this. Tell the contractors to leave. By Friday evening, they became questions. How long will the closure last? Can the company make payroll? Do you have the vendor passwords? Then, just after midnight, I didn't know Monica had discussed your salary with the bookkeeper. I did not answer. The next morning, Dad says we should sue the trust. Evelyn says we have no grounds. Still, I did not answer. Sunday afternoon, I found the on-call schedule from last year. Were you really on call 247 nights? I looked at the message for several minutes. Yes, I wrote. His reply came almost immediately. Why? Because someone had to be. The phrase belonged to him. I wanted him to recognize it. He did. There was no answer. At the cabin, I opened the spreadsheet I had kept since the funeral home's first year. Unlike the woman I had been at 30, I had never believed memory was enough for a regulated business. I tracked everything: service hours, after-hours calls, staff coverage, mileage, vendor payments, emergency repairs, community discounts, unpaid balances I absorbed rather than send to collections. I had not built the spreadsheet to prove my worth. I had built it because accuracy mattered. Now accuracy became a witness. Over 19 years, I had personally handled 2,184 services. I had taken 4,903 after-hours calls. I had covered 1,276 nights when Grant was listed as the executive on call, but forwarded the phone to me because he had an early meeting, a golf event, a cold, a dinner, or simply wasn't good with crying people. I had contributed $312,000 from my inheritance and salary to building repairs, payroll gaps, and debt reduction. Grant's family had contributed the name Pike, one used Van Howard sold to the company above market value, and Monica's occasional flower help. I created a second column, unpaid hours performed outside my contracted role, holiday coverage, family discounts authorized by Grant without consulting me, company card expenses connected to Monica, charitable services Grant announced publicly and left me to organize privately. The numbers did not make me angry. They made me tired in a way sleep could not solve. I had spent 19 years converting other people's generosity into my labor. Grant offered. I arranged. Howard promised. I paid. Monica suggested. I corrected. The town praised the Pike family for compassion, and I stayed late balancing the account. By Tuesday, I had assembled a report, not revenge, evidence. The first page contained a photograph of the funeral home when my father and I purchased it. Peeling paint, broken gutter, my father standing on a ladder with a hammer in one hand and a grin on his face. The title beneath it read, 19 Years of Responsibility. The second page listed ownership, the third, licensing. Then service hours, financial contributions, on-call coverage, family company expenses, and the documented plan to replace me during my father's illness. I included Grant's resignation letter. I included Monica's message about the shrine. I included Howard's voicemail transcript. At the end, I wrote 3 possible outcomes. 1. Grant sold his 40% interest to me at an independently appraised value and left the company. 2. I sold my operating shares to him, but the trust terminated the building lease and my license remained withdrawn, meaning he would need a new location and qualified director. 3. We dissolved the company and divided assets under the shareholder agreement. There was no option in which Monica became my supervisor and I became her mother's nurse. Evelyn reviewed the report. You have given him more choices than he gave you, she said. I want to be fair. You are being precise. Fairness depends on what he does next. We scheduled a meeting for Friday at Harbor and Finch after the last service. Grant arrived with Howard and Monica. I arrived with Evelyn, Maya, and Renee. Grant looked offended by the witnesses. This is a marriage, he said, before sitting down. Why are employees here? This is also a corporation, Evelyn replied. That is why. We met in Maya's arrangement room, a plain space with beige walls and a round table. Rain streaked the windows. No one had the advantage of sitting behind a desk. I placed a copy of the report in front of each person. Howard opened his and immediately closed it. I'm not participating in an ambush. You left me a voicemail about the Pike name, I said. Your role is documented. Monica flipped to the screenshot from November. Her face changed. You had no right to use a private family message. You discussed my employment in that message. Grant stared at the photograph of my father on the first page. For several minutes, the room held only paper sounds. Then Howard said, No one denies you worked hard. It was the kind of sentence people use when they are about to deny exactly that. But businesses evolve, he continued. Daniel was a good man. He was also old-fashioned. Grant and Monica were trying to plan for the future. My father died 6 days before Grant handed me a resignation letter. Howard looked toward Grant as though the timing were a minor clerical error. Monica said, You told everyone you wanted less responsibility. I said I wanted to spend more time with my father while he was dying. That is not how Grant explained it. Every face turned toward him. Grant's hands remained flat on the report. What did you tell them? I asked. He rubbed his thumb along the page edge. That you were burned out, that you had talked about stepping away. I never said I would resign. No. You never asked. No. You told your sister she had my job. Yes. The honesty entered the room quietly. Howard shifted in his chair. Grant, be careful. No, Dad. It was the first time Grant had contradicted him. He looked at me, and for once there was no polished explanation prepared. I thought if I asked, you would say no, he said. So you decided my no did not matter. I told myself you needed a push. To become your mother's caregiver? His face tightened. Mom trusts you. Your mother has 3 children. Monica has the twins. Derek travels. I have the business. And I had no life outside what all of you required. Nobody answered. I turned to page 11. It contained the on-call records. Grant, can you identify 1 year when you took even half the nights assigned to you? He looked down. No. Monica, can you identify 1 month when your company card charges did not require correction? That is petty. It is accounting. Howard, can you identify 1 family discount you publicly offered and personally funded? His face darkened. I brought reputation to that place. My father brought the building. The room went still. I did not raise my voice. I am not asking to be thanked for every hour. I am asking all of you to stop describing my labor as the natural environment around your decisions. Grant turned to the final page. His eyes moved across the 3 options. You want me out. I want control of my work and my property. Whether that requires you to leave depends on whether you can work beside me without treating my consent as an obstacle. Monica pushed back from the table. This is absurd. I gave notice at the dental office. You told me you left that office. I did. You just said you gave notice. She looked at Grant. The contradiction hung there. Maya lowered her eyes, but I saw the corner of her mouth tighten. Monica stood. I am not staying here to be interrogated. No one asked you to stay, Evelyn said. You are not an officer, shareholder, licensee, or employee. Monica left. Howard followed after telling Grant he would regret allowing me to humiliate the family. The door closed. Then there were 5 of us. Grant kept looking at the photograph of my father. I knew he mortgaged the cottage, he said. I did not understand at first. What? Daniel told me years ago. He asked me not to tell you until the business was stable because he knew you'd try to repay him before paying yourself. My throat tightened. You knew he sold the fishing boat too? Grant nodded. And you still called this the Pike family business. His face folded. There are moments when remorse appears so visibly that part of you wants to comfort the person feeling it. That instinct is not always love. Sometimes it is training. I kept my hands in my lap. I don't know when I became this man, he said. I do. He looked at me. Every time I solved the problem before you had to see it. No one spoke. The meeting ended without a decision. Grant had 7 days to choose an option. I returned to the cabin. The next week was different. Grant did not call to pressure me. He sent questions through Evelyn. He met with an independent appraiser. He reviewed the financial records. He interviewed 2 licensed directors and learned what their salaries would cost. He visited his mother with Monica and Derek and arranged a rotating care schedule that included professional home health support. On the 4th day, Sophie called. Dad asked me how often you missed my school events because of work. I closed my eyes. What did you say? That you missed 2. He missed 9. I remembered each of mine. A choir concert during an unexpected service. A regional science fair because a family requested a private viewing. I had apologized for both until Sophie told me to stop. Grant had missed soccer games, birthdays, and her college move-in because something social or professional seemed urgent. We had called him busy. We called me dependable. What else did he ask? I said. Whether you were happy. The question hurt more than I expected. What did you tell him? That I didn't know. Neither did I. 7 days after the meeting, Grant chose the first option. He would sell his 40% interest to me at the appraised value, resign as president, and remain available for a 90-day transition, only if I requested it. He also agreed that the Pike name would be removed from the sign. Weller Funeral Home. The old name. My father's name. My name. I read the agreement twice. Then I cried for the business I had spent 19 years believing we owned together. Selling his shares did not erase our marriage, but it removed the company from it. For the first time, we would have to decide whether anything remained between us when work, obligation, and shared reputation were no longer holding us in place. Grant moved into an apartment near the river. He did not move in with Howard and Elaine, which surprised me. Monica stopped speaking to me. Elaine's surgery took place in February. Her 3 children divided the care schedule. A nurse came each morning. Meals were delivered. The world did not end, because I was not there. The funeral home reopened after 3 weeks. The roof was repaired. The old wiring was replaced. We painted the arrangement rooms a warmer color and moved my father's workbench into the front office. Renee became operations manager with a real title, written authority, and a salary that matched her work. Lucas resumed his apprenticeship. Maya returned our transferred families with complete records and refused every attempt I made to pay her more than the contracted fee. On reopening morning, I arrived before sunrise. Snow had fallen overnight, a rare clean layer over the hill, the steps, and the bare branches of the maples. The new sign had been installed the previous evening. Weller Funeral Home, established 2005. I stood across the street and looked at it until my fingers went numb inside my gloves. My father should have seen it. That thought came first, then another. He had. Not the sign. The work. He had seen enough. Grant came by at 9 carrying a cardboard box of personal items from his old office. He paused beneath the sign. "It looks right," he said. I did not know whether he meant the lettering or the absence of his name. "Thank you." He carried the box to his car, then returned with an envelope. Inside was a check. The amount matched every company card purchase Monica had failed to repay over the years, plus interest. "I sold the boat," he said. "We had bought the boat 6 years earlier after a profitable quarter. Grant used it. I paid the insurance. You loved that boat." I loved what it said about me. He glanced toward the building. "I'm trying to learn the difference." I accepted the check, not because money repaired anything, because accountability should not be rejected merely because it arrives late. In March, Grant asked if I would meet him for coffee. We sat in a cafe near the river where no one knew us well enough to interrupt. He looked older, not dramatically, just less protected by certainty. "I started counseling," he said. I waited. "My therapist asked me why I thought your time belonged to the family." "What did you say?" "That I never thought about it. That is not an answer. I know. The real answer is that every woman in my family made herself available, and every man called that love. When you did the same thing, I thought it meant everything was working. And when I stopped, I thought you were breaking the family." He turned the coffee cup between his hands. "Now I think you were the only person refusing to keep it broken." I looked through the window at fishing boats moving slowly against the gray river. "Do you want to come home?" I asked. His eyes lifted. "Yes. That is not the same as being ready." "I know." For once, he did not argue. We began with dinner once a week. No promises, no public announcements, no pressure from family. Sometimes the dinners were easy. Sometimes one sentence opened an old wound and neither of us knew what to do except sit beside it. Grant apologized without asking me to erase the consequence. That mattered. He paid rent from his own account. He helped Elaine according to the family schedule. He corrected Howard when Howard referred to the closure as my episode. He told Monica that she would not be hired at the funeral home, now or later. I heard about that conversation from Sophie. Apparently Monica said I had brainwashed him. Grant answered, no. Claire stopped cleaning up what I refused to see. Over the next 10 months, Grant kept doing the slower work. He stayed in counseling. He paid his own rent, followed the care schedule for Elaine, and stopped volunteering my time whenever his family faced a problem. When Howard called the closure my episode, Grant corrected him without asking me to be grateful afterward. When Monica demanded another chance at the funeral home, he told her the decision was mine and that my answer was final. Elaine eventually called to ask for the names of home care agencies. She corrected herself before I could. Recommend one, she said. I am not asking you to provide the care. It was not an apology, but it was evidence that the old rules no longer felt automatic. Sophie became engaged that summer. She made it clear that neither parent would be managing her wedding, paying hidden expenses, or inviting relatives without permission. Grant accepted the boundary before I spoke. At the funeral home's 20th anniversary open house, he remained near the back, helped fold chairs after everyone left, and did not behave as though the building reflected his success. That evening he asked whether there was a path home. A path is not a guarantee, I told him. I'm not asking for one. We continued with dinners, counseling sessions, and long walks beside the river. Nothing was restored simply because he regretted losing it. He had to learn how to enter my life without assuming the door was already open. Grant moved home the following January, not because a year had passed, because enough had changed. We signed a post-nuptial agreement. The house, trust, funeral home, and my professional assets remained mine. His retirement and investments remained his. We created a shared household account with equal contributions and no hidden family withdrawals. The following spring at Sophie's wedding, Grant and I sat together in the second row. No one asked me to manage the flowers. No one handed me a clipboard. No one called Grant away to greet important people. When Sophie walked down the aisle, she looked at both of us and smiled. At the reception, Grant's mother approached our table carrying 2 cups of coffee. One black, she said, placing his down, one with cream. She had remembered mine. It was a tiny thing. Tiny things had once accumulated into erasure. They could also accumulate into repair. Later, while Sophie danced, Grant leaned toward me. Do you remember the resignation letter? Yes. I thought I was solving everyone's problems. You were. Everyone's except yours. I looked across the room at our daughter laughing beneath strings of warm lights. And yours, I said. You just didn't know it yet. He nodded. That night, back at the hotel, I opened the notebook I had begun keeping at the cabin. On the first page, I had copied Evelyn's sentence, "Do not confuse their confidence with legal power." On the final page, I wrote another, "A woman can love a family without serving as the floor beneath it." I closed the notebook. The funeral home would open at 8 the next morning. Renee had the keys. Lucas was on call. I was not needed until Monday. For 19 years, I had believed being indispensable made me safe. Now I understood that being respected was safer. I turned off the lamp and listened to Grant breathing beside me, not with the old peace of a man who assumed tomorrow had already been arranged for him. with the quieter uncertainty of someone who had finally learned to ask. And for the first time in our marriage, uncertainty did not frighten me. It sounded like room,